late October 1998. Across Honduras and Nicaragua, rain falls without pause. Rivers rise past their banks and keep climbing.
Awesome weather around the world.
All right, well, the big story, and really the only story in the tropics at this point, is Hurricane Mitch.
Hillsides give way and slide into villages below. Roads vanish, bridges snap, radios fade into static as towers fail. Rescue crews lose contact with each other one by one. The storm does not move. It lingers, unloading water hour after hour, until the damage cannot be stopped. Days earlier, the signs looked very different. Hurricane Mitch began as a broad tropical system in the western Caribbean Sea in mid-October 1998. It formed near the warm waters north of Panama and south of Jamaica. At first, the storm moved slowly, drifting near the coasts of Honduras and Nicaragua. There was no fast track toward land, no clear signal of urgency. For many forecasters, it looked like a powerful storm that might curve away or weaken with time. As Mitch strengthened, attention stayed fixed on the wind. Reports focused on its growing size and speed offshore. When the storm reached Category 5 strength, with winds near 180 miles per hour, it remained over water. That distance mattered. For communities on land, the danger still felt indirect. A strong storm at sea did not always mean disaster on shore. In Central America, daily life continued. Markets stayed open, buses ran their routes. Farmers worked fields that depended on rain for survival. Heavy rainfall was familiar. Seasonal storms often caused flooding and landslides, but people had lived through those before. Damage came, repairs followed, and life moved on. That history shaped how Mitch was understood. There was also little evacuation culture across much of the region. Many communities were rural and spread across hills and valleys. Leaving meant abandoning crops, animals, and homes with no promise of return. Few had vehicles. Roads were limited. Shelters were scarce. Staying put often felt safer than moving without a clear direction. Early forecasts did not stress rainfall as the main threat. Wind categories were easier to explain. Rain totals were harder to picture. Few warnings explained what days of nonstop rain could do to steep land and narrow river valleys. Mitch was powerful, but it seemed distant. The belief settled in that the storm would weaken or shift away before the worst arrived. In Honduras and Nicaragua, people watched the sky, not the maps. Clouds gathered, rain began. That alone did not raise alarms. It was still within the range of what felt normal. Radios shared updates, but nothing suggested a disaster without escape. What many did not see was how slowly the storm was moving. Mitch hovered near the coast, drawing in moisture and releasing it again and again over the same ground. Rivers were already rising while the wind still seemed far away. Hillsides were soaking through long before any official warning changed tone. What people believed was based on past storms. What the atmosphere was doing had already moved beyond those limits. As Hurricane Mitch intensified, the warning window opened wide, but the danger inside it was hard to grasp. In late October 1998, the storm rapidly strengthened over the western Caribbean. Sea temperatures were unusually warm. That heat fed the system nonstop. Mitch grew larger and stronger with little resistance. Within a short time, it reached Category 5 strength, with winds near 180 miles per hour. Meteorologists took notice. A storm this strong in the Caribbean was rare. Satellite images showed a massive circulation pulling moisture from every direction. The concern was real, but the message stayed narrow. Most warnings focused on wind speed and storm strength. Those details mattered, but they were not the main threat forming. High above the storm, the winds that usually guide hurricanes began to weaken. These steering winds act like a current in the sky. When they slow, storms lose direction. Mitch did exactly that. Instead of moving inland or turning away, It slowed to a crawl near the coasts of Honduras and Nicaragua. That slowdown changed everything. As Mitch lingered, rain bands wrapped around the storm again and again. Each pass dropped more water on land that was already soaked. Rivers began to rise early. Hillsides absorbed rain hour after hour. There was no clear end point. Forecasts could not say when the rain would stop, only that it would continue. Some meteorologists raised alarms about rainfall. They warned that the real danger was water, not wind. But those warnings struggled to spread. Rainfall numbers are hard to explain. Saying a river will rise means little if people do not know how fast or how far. Few could picture what days of nonstop rain would do to steep terrain and narrow valleys. There was also no shared memory to draw from. Central America had faced hurricanes before, but not one that stopped and unloaded rain for days. Most storms passed through. Flooding followed, then receded. Mitch did not follow that pattern. It stayed close, slow, and relentless. Communication systems added another layer of failure. Many areas relied on radio, word of mouth, or limited government bulletins. Power outages began early. Remote communities received little information at all. Even when warnings existed, they often arrived late or without clear guidance. Regional forecasting resources were stretched thin. Weather offices across Central America had limited tools and staff. Coordination across borders was weak. Each country tracked the storm on its own, often with different messages and timelines. There was no single, unified warning system to describe the full scale of the risk. Evacuation was also a challenge. Large movements of people were rare in the region. Roads were few. Many villages were accessible only by narrow paths or mountain routes. Leaving meant traveling through rain that was already triggering landslides. For many families, staying felt like the only option. The focus on wind continued to shape public understanding. Mitch's strongest winds remained offshore for much of this time. On land, conditions felt severe but familiar. Rain fell, streams overflowed, but without a clear signal of collapse. Urgency stayed low. Meanwhile, the storm kept feeding on warm water. Each hour added more moisture to the system. Rivers crossed their banks long before the storm officially made landfall. By the time Mitch weakened and began to drift inland, the damage was already unfolding far upstream. Warnings existed. Forecasts showed danger, but the scale did not translate into action fast enough. And what happens when a storm stops moving and the rain has nowhere else to go? As Hurricane Mitch hovered offshore in late October 1998, the first signs of collapse arrived quietly. Rain began across Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and El Salvador. At first, it felt ordinary, heavy, steady, familiar. Communities were used to rainstorms that lasted a day or two. This one did not stop. Rivers started to rise during the first night, not fast, not suddenly. They crept upward, inch by inch, hour by hour. In rural valleys, water spread across fields and low roads. Farmers watched streams climb higher than normal, but there was still no signal that escape was needed. The storm remained offshore. Wind damage was limited. The danger felt distant. By the second day, rain continued without pause. Morning brought no relief, though afternoon brought no break. Night fell with the same sound of water on rooftops and soil. River gauges climbed past known levels. In some areas, there were no gauges at all, only memory. And memory had no reference for what was coming. Mitch did not move inland. It did not turn away. It stayed close to the coast and barely shifted position. Each rotation pulled more moisture from the warm Caribbean and released it over the same land again and again. Rain bands repeated their path. Meteorologists call this training. For communities below, it meant constant pressure. Hills absorbed water until they could not hold more. The fields turned to mud. Forest floors loosened. By the third day, rivers were no longer rising slowly. They surged. Banks collapsed. Water tore through villages built near streams. In Honduras, the Ulua River spilled across wide areas of farmland. In Nicaragua, Smaller rivers became deadly channels. Soil reached full saturation. Every slope became unstable. The land itself was losing strength. Then the ground began to fail. In the mountains of Honduras and Nicaragua, hillsides collapsed without warning. Entire sections of earth slid downhill, carrying trees, homes, and people with them. Mudslides moved fast and struck with full force. One of the worst disasters occurred near the Casita volcano in Nicaragua. Days of rain loosened volcanic soil. A massive landslide swept through nearby communities, burying villages in seconds. Thousands were lost in that single event. Roads vanished under mud and water. Main highways cracked and broke apart. Bridges were ripped from their foundations and carried downstream. Remote towns became unreachable within hours. In many places, there was no time to run, no higher ground nearby. Families were caught inside homes as walls collapsed. Others were taken while sleeping. By now, rain had fallen for days. The storm still lingered. As the land gave way, infrastructure followed. Power grids failed across wide regions. Transmission lines collapsed under falling trees and mud. Entire provinces went dark. Communication systems went silent. Radios stopped working. Phone lines were cut. Hospitals were isolated. Some flooded. Others lost electricity and clean water. Doctors and nurses worked by flashlight. Supplies ran low fast. Patients could not be moved because roads no longer existed. Emergency services were overwhelmed. There were too many calls and no way to reach most locations. Vehicles could not pass through mud-covered roads. Helicopters were scarce and grounded by the weather. Water systems failed. Wells were contaminated. Clean drinking water became rare. Disease risk rose quickly in crowded shelters and flooded areas. Governments struggled to assess the damage. With communication down, even basic information was missing. Entire communities disappeared from contact. The human cost became clear only after the water receded. Whole villages were gone, not damaged, gone, buried under layers of mud and debris. In Honduras, tens of thousands were left homeless. In Nicaragua, entire regions were flattened. Guatemala and El Salvador faced similar destruction. Families searched for relatives with bare hands. Survivors dug through mud, calling names, hoping for any sound. Parents shielded children during landslides and floods, sometimes at the cost of their own lives. Neighbors rescued neighbors. Strangers pulled strangers from debris. In the absence of an organized response, local people became first responders. Bodies were recovered days, or sometimes weeks. Many were never found. Official death counts rose slowly, then sharply. Estimates would later place the total death toll at more than 11,000 people, with thousands more missing. International aid was delayed. Airports were damaged. Ports were blocked. Roads were destroyed. Relief teams struggled to reach the worst-hit areas. Food shortages followed. Crops were wiped out. Livestock drowned. Entire harvests were lost in 1 week. Economic damage spread beyond the storm zone. By the time Mitch finally weakened and moved inland, the destruction was complete. The storm had not needed to strike fast. It only needed to stay. Entire nations were left changed. The loss did not end when the rain stopped. Hurricane Mitch became catastrophic because several limits were reached at the same time. Nature pushed hard, and human systems were not built to absorb the pressure. No single decision caused the outcome. The damage came from how the storm met the land, the climate, and the conditions people were already living with. The first factor was the water itself. In October 1998, the Caribbean Sea was unusually warm. Warm water fueled storms by adding heat and moisture to the air. Mitch passed over this water slowly, pulling energy upward without interruption. Each hour over the sea made the storm heavier with rain. The atmosphere above the region was also packed with moisture. This meant every rain band carried more water than normal. When clouds released that water, it fell hard and kept falling. The rain did not arrive in bursts. It came as a long, steady downpour that lasted for days. Normally, steering winds guide storms along a path. During Mitch, those winds were weak. With nothing to push it forward, The storm slowed to a crawl near Honduras and Nicaragua. This mattered more than wind speed. A slow storm keeps raining over the same ground. The land never gets time to recover. That led to the next problem: terrain. Much of Central America is mountainous. Hills and valleys shape daily life. When rain falls on slopes, gravity takes over. Water flows downhill fast, carrying soil with it. During Mitch, the hillsides absorbed rain until they failed. Once the ground loosened, entire slopes collapsed. Deforestation made this worse. In many areas, forests had been cleared for farming or fuel. Tree roots normally hold soil together. Without them, slopes were fragile. When rain soaked the ground, there was nothing left to stop it from sliding. That is why landslides became so deadly. Villages built on or below hillsides were struck with no warning. Mud and debris moved faster than people could react. Human systems added more risk. Many homes were built from wood, mud brick, or light materials. These structures could not withstand fast-moving water or heavy debris. When flooding began, houses broke apart quickly. Each collapse added more material to the flow, increasing damage downstream. Communication failures deepened the crisis. Power outages shut down radios and phones. Without clear information, people could not coordinate, escape, or aid. Governments struggled to assess where help was needed most. Across borders, coordination was weak. Mitch affected several countries at once, but response systems were mostly local. Resources were stretched thin everywhere at the same time. Each factor alone might have caused damage. Together, they removed every layer of protection. Warm seas fed the storm. Weak winds held it in place. Mountains guided water into villages. Deforestation loosened the ground. Fragile housing collapsed. Planning gaps slowed the response. Poverty limited escape. Mitch did not need extreme winds to cause a disaster. It needed time, water, and land that could not shed either fast enough. What followed forced entire regions to rethink how storms are faced and who pays the price when systems fail. When the rain finally eased, the scale of loss became clear. Hurricane Mitch left more than 11,000 people dead across Central America. Many thousands more were never officially counted. Entire communities were erased from maps. Millions were displaced, forced to leave homes that no longer existed. Honduras and Nicaragua were hit hardest. Rivers changed course. Farmland vanished under mud and debris. Roads and bridges were torn away, cutting off aid for weeks. In some regions, the damage reached every part of daily life at once. Food supplies collapsed. Clean water was scarce. Disease spread quickly in crowded shelters. Recovery was slow and uneven. For many families, it took years just to return to basic stability. For some areas, recovery stretched into decades. Children missed school. Jobs disappeared. Migration increased as people searched for safety and work elsewhere. The storm did not just damage buildings. It reshaped lives and futures. Governments faced intense pressure to respond differently next time. Disaster response systems were reviewed and reworked. Early warning efforts improved, with better coordination between weather services and emergency agencies. Radios, local alerts, and community networks became more central to preparedness. These changes saved lives in later disasters. Warnings reached more people. Evacuations happened earlier. Response times improved in some areas, but many problems remained unresolved. Climate-driven rainfall risk continued to rise. Storms brought heavier rain than older systems were designed to handle. Flood-prone areas stayed exposed, especially where land use had not changed. Poverty remained a constant pressure. Many families still lived on steep slopes or near rivers because safer land was out of reach. Housing quality improved in some cities, but rural areas lagged behind. Hurricane Mitch proved that disaster is not only about storms, it is about where people live, what they rely on, and how quickly help can reach them. And Mitch was not an isolated event. It was a warning that would echo through later storms, each one testing the same limits in new ways. Another storm would follow, in a different region and under a different name. The signs would look familiar: warm water, weak steering winds, rain that does not stop, For a short time, there would be space to act and choices to make. Then that window would begin to close. If you want to follow the next investigation as it unfolds, subscribe and stay with us for what comes next.